The first box hit the pavement with a dull thud, sending a cascade of winter scarves tumbling across the icy front steps. Norah felt the sting in her chest before the cold could even reach her skin. She stared at the mess, unsure whether to reach down or just stand there, frozen like a mannequin in a store window. The laughter coming from the doorway broke her hesitation. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. You might want to hurry, Greg chuckled, leaning against the frame of the front door with a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. The movers charge by the hour. Norah looked up slowly, blinking once. She said nothing. Oh, come on, don't give me that face, he added with a smug grin. You've been sleepwalking through this marriage for years. I'm just the guy who finally turned on the lights. Behind him, a tall, willowy blonde in a silk robe came into view. She giggled as she looped her arm around Greg's, watching Norah like she was the afternoon's entertainment. There were no tears. Not this time. Instead, Norah bent down calmly and began packing the scarves back into the box. She didn't say a word, didn't ask for an explanation. She simply moved. Deliberate, quiet, like she was checking items off a list. Greg hated that. He hated when she didn't react. He always wanted a scene. But Norah wasn't giving him that today. She was saving the performance for later. Make sure you take that sad little jewelry box too, he called out, pointing with his coffee. It's not like you'll be needing it where you're going. The blonde burst into laughter, her high-pitched giggle bouncing off the icy driveway. Norah's fingers curled tightly around the edge of the box. She stood, finally meeting Greg's eyes. You're right, she said evenly. I won't. Norah had woken up before the alarm. Not out of anticipation or stress, but out of habit. Years of early mornings, first for their daughter Lily's breakfast, then for the bookkeeping work she did from home, had tuned her body to this rhythm. But this morning was different. This morning, the final piece of her plan would click into place. She reached over and turned off the alarm before it could buzz. The sun hadn't yet risen, but Norah was already out of bed, her slippers whispering across the hardwood floors of the guest room, the room Greg had banished her to for space over a year ago. She went to her laptop, which was hidden in a drawer beneath piles of unused linens. The screen glowed softly as she entered her password, fingers swift and steady. She opened a folder labeled simply, Tuesday. Inside were 4 documents. She clicked the first one. A scanned copy of the original share distribution contract for GNN Logistics, the company she and Greg had built from their garage 15 years ago. The second document. A notarized power of attorney form signed by Greg 2 years ago when he'd had a minor surgery. He hadn't read it carefully. She'd slipped in a clause that authorized business transfers in case of emergency restructuring. The third file. An email thread between Norah and their silent investor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Valerie who had always liked Norah more than Greg. And the final file. The signed transfer agreement dated today, giving full majority ownership of the company back to Norah. She hit send. Then she stood up, smoothed her sweater, and went to pack. The last of her boxes were loaded into the back of her sister's SUV. Her breath misted in the cold air as she turned back toward the house for one final look. Greg stood there, arms crossed, still smug. I'm being generous, you know, he called out. Most guys would fight for everything. You should be grateful. Norah tilted her head slightly, as if genuinely considering his words. Generous, she repeated. Yeah, he said, puffing out his chest. You walk away, no alimony battles, no court. Clean cut. She gave a small smile. You're right, she said. It is a clean cut. Then she opened the passenger door and stepped in. As they pulled away, Greg raised his coffee cup in a mock salute. Greg was in the home office, feet up, already shopping for boats on his laptop. His mistress, Elena, 26, influencer and allergic to real jobs, was twirling around in his shirt upstairs, taking selfies with Norah's old mirror. His phone pinged. Greg glanced at it and frowned. Notification from GNN Bank. Access denied. He tried again. Another ping. Unauthorized access attempt. Count locked. What the hell? He grabbed his office phone and hit speed dial for the CFO. Hey Greg, said a tight voice on the other end. Keith, what's going on with the accounts? I just got locked out. There was a pause. You didn't check your email. Keith asked. No, I'm looking at boats. What email? Another pause. There's been a restructuring. What do you mean restructuring? I didn't approve anything. According to the paperwork we received this morning, you're no longer the majority shareholder. Greg's blood ran cold. That's impossible. I built this company. No offense, Greg, Keith said carefully. But so did your wife. And she just called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Greg dropped the phone. It had started with a bookkeeping error. Norah found it late one night, buried in quarterly tax statements she wasn't supposed to see anymore. Greg had told her to leave the business stuff to him, but Norah had always been the better numbers person. The error wasn't just a typo, it was a funneling scheme. Greg had been moving company funds into a side account. The name on the account, V. Investments. E for Elena, V for Valerie. The investor he thought he was deceiving. That was the night Norah stopped crying. She started documenting everything. She printed emails. She screen-recorded calls. She dug into old contracts, old powers of attorney. She contacted Valerie. The two women, bonded by betrayal and disgust, began planning. Greg sat in a leather chair at the GNN conference room, staring at a sea of unfamiliar faces. Lawyers, advisors, board members. At the head of the table stood Norah. Not meek, not broken. Poised. She was wearing the necklace he always said made her look too serious. She smiled coolly. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. I'll be leading today's agenda. Greg opened his mouth, but Valerie raised her hand. Don't bother, Greg, she said. It's done. You lost your seat. Greg turned red. You think you can just take everything from me? Norah leaned forward, voice like velvet-wrapped steel. Oh, I didn't take everything, Greg. Just what was mine. The boardroom was silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Greg's hand tightened around the armrest of his chair, the knuckles pale. His jaw clenched as his eyes darted between Norah and the legal counsel beside her. Norah looked down at her notes, calm as a surgeon before an incision. To begin, she said, the financial review reveals discrepancies going back 18 months. Money was siphoned into shell accounts. As acting CEO and now majority shareholder, I've authorized a full forensic audit. Greg jolted in his seat. You can't. Norah didn't flinch. I can. And I already have. The board members whispered among themselves. Valerie tapped a manicured finger against her tablet, scrolling through spreadsheets Greg hadn't even known existed. You knew, didn't you? Greg hissed across the table. You set this up. Norah finally looked up, meeting his eyes with a piercing calm. I gave you 10 years to be honest, she said. And 6 months to come clean. You chose to lie every time. Her voice didn't waver. Their first big client had just signed on. GNN Logistics was nothing more than a 3-room warehouse and a rented truck, but they were riding high. Norah had worked late every night building their client lists and running invoices while Greg made sales calls from his phone. You're the brain, he used to say. I'm the charm. It worked for a while. But as the business grew, so did Greg's ego. He started calling her the wife who types, brushing off her ideas during meetings, excluding her from executive decisions. Still she stayed. She believed in loyalty. But loyalty without respect was a cage. Greg stormed out of the boardroom, phone pressed to his ear. He barked orders into the receiver. Freeze everything. Block her access. Do something. She can't just. Greg. The voice on the other end was flat. It was the company's legal head, Diane. What? You're not authorized anymore. He stopped walking. What the hell are you talking about? Your accounts have been restricted. Per the signed restructuring documents, only Norah can authorize financial decisions now. That's a mistake. She forged something, I know it." "She didn't," Diane said. "We verified everything. You signed the power of attorney 2 years ago. You gave her the right to do this." Greg's world began to spin. Norah returned to her sister's apartment and dropped her bag by the door. She didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. The weight of everything sat heavy on her shoulders. "You okay?" her sister Melanie asked, bringing her tea. Norah nodded slowly, curling her hands around the warm mug. "I don't know what to feel," she said. "Part of me wants to cry. The other part wants to scream." Melanie sat beside her. "You did what needed to be done. For Lily. For you." At the mention of her daughter's name, Norah looked down. Lily was the only reason she hadn't walked away years ago. Their daughter had just started college. Norah had shielded her from Greg's temper, the gaslighting, the infidelities. She'd wanted to protect her from the ugliness. But now the truth was crawling into the light. And it was time Lily knew who her father really was. 3 years ago, Norah had walked into Greg's home office late at night, intending to leave a cup of coffee on his desk. Instead, she saw a message flash across his screen. "Last weekend was incredible. Wish she didn't suspect." The name on the message, unknown. The content, unmistakable. She'd never confronted him. Not then. Instead, she started building her firewall. He sat alone in a dark bar on the edge of town, nursing a glass of bourbon and scrolling through emails. Every financial advisor he contacted had the same answer. "There's nothing we can do. You signed everything." His phone buzzed again, this time from Elena. "Babe, why is the card declined again?" He didn't answer. The waitress dropped the check. Greg stared at it blankly for a moment before reaching for his wallet and realizing, with a punch of panic, that even his personal accounts had been frozen pending the audit. "Put it on the card," he said without thinking. "It was declined, sir," the waitress replied gently. Greg clenched his jaw. "Try it again." She did. Still declined. He tossed a handful of bills from his coat pocket onto the table and stormed out, leaving behind more than he owed but far less than his pride could afford. She stared at a photo of Lily in her dorm room, taken just weeks before the blow-up. Lily was smiling, standing in front of her political science building with a campus banner in hand. Norah opened her phone, took a deep breath, and hit record. "Hey baby," she began. "There's a lot I've wanted to say, but didn't. Not because I was hiding, but because I was waiting. Waiting until I was strong enough to say it without falling apart." He paused. "Your dad isn't who you think he is. And maybe one day I'll tell you everything. But for now, just know I'm okay. I'm not weak. And you're the reason I remembered who I was." She hit send. It didn't take long. By the end of day 3, Elena was gone. She'd packed her things and posted a story on Instagram about not settling for broke energy. Greg watched it with disbelief, mouth slightly agape. "You think you're better off with her," he muttered to the screen. Elena blew a kiss into the camera. In the background, a new man's arm was around her waist. Greg hurled his phone across the room. At a follow-up board meeting, Norah unveiled the full audit findings. Greg had not only been skimming from the company. He'd also falsified data to boost short-term profits during investor reviews. The penalty: possible jail time. Norah didn't push for it. She didn't need to. She knew humiliation was the one punishment Greg couldn't stomach. Instead, she offered him a deal: surrender the rest of his minor shares and step away from the company, or face the SEC with every documented infraction. He took the deal. Barely. Later that week, Greg stood on the porch of a 2-bedroom rental in a distant suburb, suitcase in hand. The house smelled of old carpet and faded dreams. He sat down on the mattress, still wrapped in plastic, and buried his face in his hands. He had laughed as Norah left. And now, no one was laughing. She walked through the halls of the company she helped build, really walked them for the first time in years. Employees smiled, whispered, "Welcome back," even clapped quietly. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to rebuild. In her new office, she placed a single photo on the desk, a picture of Lily, Norah, and Greg at the company's 10-year anniversary party. It was the last picture taken before things changed. She turned the frame face down. The new GNN headquarters buzzed with a quiet kind of energy. Gone were the sterile tones and cold decor Greg had insisted on. Norah had revamped the space. Sunlight through tall windows, soft gray accents, local artwork on the walls. It no longer looked like the lair of a corporate tyrant. It looked like the heart of a business that respected people. Norah sat behind her desk, reading over a proposal from HR for improved maternity leave benefits. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she called. It was Valerie. "You've got visitors," Valerie said with a raised brow. Norah glanced at the time. "Clients." Valerie smirked. "Family." Lily stood nervously beside Melanie. She was taller now, older, but her face still held that same curiosity Norah remembered from the days she'd help with science projects and iron her debate team blazer. Norah approached slowly. Lily met her halfway and without a word threw her arms around her mother. "I'm sorry," Lily said against her shoulder. Norah pulled back, surprised. "Why would you be sorry? I didn't know what he was doing to you. I didn't see it. I thought you were just tired all the time or stressed." "You were a kid," Norah said gently. "You were never supposed to carry what I was going through." Lily's eyes glistened. "I want to help now. However I can." Norah smiled, not with her lips but with her whole face. "You just did," she whispered. GNN held a press conference announcing their new initiative, a scholarship for women entrepreneurs in logistics, titled the NM Fund, Norah's initials. Reporters crowded the front row. One raised a hand. "What prompted this, Ms. Monroe?" Norah's voice was steady. "Experience," she said. "I know what it's like to be dismissed, underestimated, sidelined. And I know what it's like to fight your way back." Another reporter asked, "Do you worry this will be seen as revenge?" Norah gave a small laugh. "It's not revenge. It's restoration. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to lead." Valerie beamed beside her. Greg's phone buzzed again. Another job rejection. Another, "We've decided to go in a different direction." Even his old contacts had gone radio silent. His name carried weight now, but not the kind he wanted. He took a sip of instant coffee, watching the light flicker above his kitchen table. His life had shrunk to a third of its size. Smaller apartment, smaller car, smaller ego. In the quiet of the evening, he opened his laptop and checked LinkedIn. There in his feed was Norah's face, standing beside Lily and a group of young scholarship recipients, smiling as she handed out the first awards from the NM Fund. She looked radiant, unbothered, complete. Greg stared for a long moment, then closed the screen. He didn't bother laughing. Norah sat with Lily in the back garden of her new house, a modest but beautiful two-story with a wraparound porch and a pear tree in full bloom. "Do you ever miss it?" Lily asked. "The house. The old life." Norah sipped her tea and looked around. "No," she said honestly. "Because that wasn't a life. It was a performance. This." She gestured to the quiet, to the garden, to the plate of fresh muffins between them. "This is real." Lily leaned her head on Norah's shoulder. "You're kinda badass, you know that?" Norah laughed. "Took me a while to realize it." Later that evening, Valerie showed up with an envelope. "What's this?" Norah asked. Valerie hesitated. "It's from a legal firm. Came addressed to you, but they routed it through me because it mentioned GNN." Norah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a USB drive. She read silently, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Valerie asked. Norah held up the letter. "It's from a woman named Rachel, Elena's sister." Valerie blinked. "The girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," Norah corrected. Apparently, Elena bragged about how Greg had used GNN funds to rent a separate condo under an alias. Rachel found records and wants to hand them over, but she's afraid to go to the authorities. Valerie leaned in. "So what are you thinking?" Norah held the USB drive up to the light. I think we're not done yet. A quiet indictment was filed at the local courthouse. Norah never appeared in public about it. She didn't make a statement, but she did receive a small, folded note in the mail a week later. Now I know what it's like to be erased. You win. G. Norah tucked it into the back of a drawer and closed it gently. Not out of cruelty, out of peace. Norah stood before a room full of women. Young and old, students and veterans, mothers and dreamers. All of them entrepreneurs. She spoke not with grandeur, but with grace. You don't need revenge to rise, she said. You need courage, time, and people who see you when the world tries to look past you. The applause rose like a wave. In the front row, Lily clapped the loudest. And for the first time in years, Norah felt what she hadn't even known she was missing. Freedom. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.